What's up, everyone? I just got kicked out of Last Epoch for the 5th, 7th, 12th, I don't know. I've lost count of how many times I've gotten disconnected today alone. And I figured I would make a video about why this will probably continue to happen for a bit longer, why the developers can't just throw more resources at it, and hopefully give a little bit more clarity about how these services work under the hood. My name's Cody Engel. I'm a professional software engineer, and I'm sort of qualified to be able to talk about this a bit and hopefully just, give you an idea about what's going on under the hood and why they just aren't throwing more servers at the problem, because I'm sure they would love to have their weekend off, and instead have been here trying to fix the game all weekend. So over here we can see Steam charts. Just over 7 minutes ago, there were about 200,000 people playing the game. The most people that have played the game all time is about 250,000 people, which is quite a few when you think about how much running around and how many, monsters they are fighting and battling, and items they're picking up, loot drops, and, all of that stuff that's going on that needs to be validated by a server. So we are over here in Excalidraw, and we have Last Epoch's 1.0 launch. Something that is going on that people are having issues with is logging into the game. What happens when you log in? Why can't you just have multiple login servers and then everything will just be okay? Well, any sort of login is going to essentially be running this way, where you have your game client here, and then you have your authentication service. Over here, the game client says, "Hello, I would like to log in and play." And then the authentication service says, "Okay, let me go over here and I will talk to Steam. Is this player legit?" So you have this over here asking, is the player legit or not? And then if the player is legit, then you need to generate a player token, or authentication token is more what it would be called. So you have that. So we can have our other line going over here saying, okay, we generate the token. Now what this token is going to look like is something along the lines of your user ID, which might be like 1234. Then you might have your characters. So these might be the IDs for your characters. So maybe you have character 1, 5, 56, and then we'll say probably like expires at, which is probably, let's say, like 10 minutes from now. And there's probably a lot more information that they're sending, but this is sort of conceptually, the idea is this is your user ID, your information for that, your characters, when your authentication token would expire. And all of this is then spit over here. And then your authentication token goes here, back up this way into the authentication service, and then it is sent back up to you. So your token probably doesn't look like this when it's being sent back. It's probably, first of all, the string is encrypted, and then it's probably transformed or it's probably base 64 encoded or whatever. So like it might just look like, I don't know, like something like this. This might be your token that you get back. So you get that token, and then the game client is going to hold on to that token until it expires in 10 minutes. And then it's going to say, hey, I need another token. Can you give me another token? And it'll send this token through. And with that token, you can probably then bypass Steam because you know that the player was probably legit. So then you just regenerate a new token. This is a bit simplistic. There are probably two of these tokens. One of them might be your refresh token that lets you get new tokens. And then another one is your authentication token or your access token, which actually lets you access the game and do other things. But essentially, though, you are behind the scenes getting multiple of these tokens during a session. Now keep that in mind because we will come back to this, but I want to get into the next part that we need to do for the game, which is maintain client connections. So let me go ahead and let's just copy these. We're going to copy these two things here, drop them down there. And then the game client is going to now say, okay, establish a new connection. So create connection to Last Epoch. We can think of this connection as going both ways. So you send some information to Last Epoch sends some information to you. You might say, I swung my sword, and Last Epoch might say, you hit the enemy, and the enemy is no longer with us. This connection that's being created, though, it needs to be persisted the entire time that you are playing the game. So this connection is going to take resources. We could maybe say that this takes 25 megabytes of memory. And then maybe it takes, if you're thinking of, this is a really weird way to think of it, but let's say it's like 0.25 gigahertz of compute. Maybe it's just, say, 25 megahertz of compute. And then from there, it's maybe using, I don't know, 1 megabyte. Let's say maybe 10 megabytes every 30 minutes. I guess we could just say 20 megabytes every 60 minutes. The numbers here don't actually matter. The whole point, though, is that you have these system resources that are being taken up by the connection. So your individual one might use up this many resources. And then the 250,000 people that are also playing the game are going to use up this many resources for the duration of their game session. So you can see these connections, they are somewhat expensive to maintain. They are necessary to keep the game going, though. Getting into the more complicated stuff, which is actually loading the game instances. So you have a connection now. The next thing that you need to do is actually play the game. So from what I've observed while I've been playing the game, is there is essentially some matchmaking service that they have, because they will tell you when you don't connect to matchmaking. So there is a matchmaking service, and I kind of predict that this service is the thing responsible for figuring out what game instance to put you in and generate. So you might have Area 1 instance. And when I say Area 1, this might be the starting instance of the game. They might just have a bunch of these generic services that are spun up that only maintain the first area of the game. And so you have these fun arrows that are going to here. In this example, we only have a starting instance that's mapped out here, but you have the matchmaking service figuring out which instance to put you in. And so up here with our connection that we have, the connection that we have created, you can imagine that there is some arrow going down to here. Okay. And then that arrow is asking the matchmaking service, what instance can you be allocated to? So, there's 4 instances. Maybe instance 1 is full, instance 2 is full, instance 3 has 1 spot open. And maybe you try to get that, but while instance 3, or while you're trying to connect, another player fills in instance 3. So you try to connect, and now it's full, and it's has to go back up and then go, okay, well, the game client now has to retry and ask again. So it goes, okay, area 1, full, 2, full, 3, full, 4. Okay, there's enough people. Cool. You're good to go. So that could be happening every single time that you go to the starting area, every time you go into town, every time you go into a different area of the game. And if you've played Last Epoch, you go from one area to the other pretty quickly. Sometimes you're in an area for 10 minutes. Sometimes you're in an area for 1 minute. Really depends. And so you have to imagine this is happening hundreds, thousands of times every single second. And it's trying to go through for every single player in the game to make them have a smooth experience. And obviously they're not having a smooth experience, which then brings me to the issue of, well, why can't you just throw more more instances at the problem. Like, I can just copy this and then I can paste in more. Like, we can just duplicate these over and over again. But again, this matchmaking service, it needs to be able to find an empty instance for you. And so there are some ways that they could be doing this, that they could be figuring out, is it empty or not? And that could just be the matchmaking service. It has a list of all these instances and it knows exactly how many players are in the service at any one time. So we have all of these instances that could be created. We could be just throwing resources at the problem, but the matchmaking service then becomes kind of overwhelmed because it still needs to know what instance can it send players to. If there's 100,000 instances that it could possibly use, and maybe instance one doesn't have anyone in it right now and instance 2 is full, well, cool, it can just send everyone to instance 1 until that fills up and then go on to the next one. But you have to have a good way of being able to find these empty instances, which isn't necessarily the easiest problem to try to solve because these instances are just kind of generic and out there. Like, if you were connected to, let's say, area 1, and then you moved out and now you're connected to this other instance that instead of area 1, it's, area 4, you've progressed now or whatever. And then you've hopped over to area 3, maybe. As you're hopping around, capacity's opening up so more people can join this instance. So it could be a situation where their servers are auto-scaling, but they just can't find the open instances. And so it's not that this problem isn't solvable. It's just that this problem is not solved by throwing more resources at the problem. They first need to optimize the solution so that the matchmaking service over here can actually find available instances to send you to that are appropriate. Another issue that they could be facing as well, because when you're in that area 1 instance, you're kind of on your own, but there is also this town instance that you could think of where this actually connects you to other players. So we could use these little circles for different players. So player 1 and then player 2 all the way over to, player 50 or however many players are allowed in a town at a given time. When you go to hop from area instance 1 over to this town instance, well, it needs to know that you have capacity there. And again, it's kind of the same idea of it not knowing which town it can send you to, because there's so many different towns that could have capacity or could not have capacity. The matchmaking service, the other issue, if you try to throw more resources at this problem, well, you could have multiple different matchmaking services, but those are still going to be bound to the exact same data store for looking up. So this might be maybe some Redis table, and it could have instance 1 goes to 192.1 blah 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 blah, some IP address, instance 2 some other IP address, and then instance 3 again some other IP address. I know those aren't IP addresses, but it's just easier to type in a couple of things to say this points to this points to that, whatever. If you have that where the matchmaking service can then look up that information, that could become a little bit easier. And then perhaps the instances themselves, they could keep record of up here. It could be, that's the IP address, and then this has 50 out of 50 spots are filled. This one has 25 out of 50 filled. It could be saying how much capacity it has left. But again, you still end up with this list of, okay, which instance do I send you to? Because I potentially need to go through all of those. If this is the case where it's set up in this way, they need to solve the problem for how can I find a new instance for you as fast as possible before thinking about how can I spawn up more services. Once they have this working as efficiently as possible, then they can start throwing resources at the problem. and scaling up to many, many more users. Of course, though, I said we will come back to authentication, and I think now is a good time for us to come back to the authentication problem, which is, let's say you try to connect to matchmaking service, and then it goes, nope, your token is not valid. So it says, it, calls up over to here, and it asks, is the token valid? So let me create a new little box for us over here. Is token valid? And let's say that it is no, it's not valid. So you would have another line, travel back down to here to say nope. And I don't know why this is doing it, but it works out okay. It goes back up through your connection here, over to here. I don't know how I'm going to get this line to stop drawing, but it brings you essentially back up here to say, hey, you need to create a new token, and then you go back through and create a new token. This could be happening, again, tens, hundreds of thousands of times every 10 minutes, hammering away at this authentication service. This is token valid would be getting called more times than that. It would be getting called every single time that the server needs to validate that you are you, which I would guess is any time that you're traveling between instances. So that would not be the way that you would want to set this up, because then your authentication service becomes your bottleneck for everything. I'm assuming that that's not the case. If it is the case, though, the route that you would take to fix this is you would essentially have this string of text that is being encrypted. It is encrypted by a private key, which might be, I don't know, let's say the private key is 1234. And then it can be decrypted by a public key, which might be 5678. What you can do is the authentication server is the one that has the private key. It generates this encrypted string for you using this encrypted key. And then this encrypted public key, this can be shared out with every other service. So the matchmaking client, it could have the public key. And then what it can do is it can decrypt this using that public key. And then it will, assuming that the authentication token here was signed with the private key, when it's decrypted, it will have this exact string, user ID 1234, characters 1556, expires at whatever. If it tries to decrypt that and it doesn't get that string back, like this string, when it tries to decrypt it, if it doesn't get that value back and it instead gets, if it was signed with a different private key, it could just be a bunch of nothingness. It could be a bunch of random characters that don't look anything like this. So it tries to use this value and it immediately hits an issue and goes, oh, nope. I don't even know what this is talking about. And so that could be a route that they could take where this service, once it hits that issue and it tries to decrypt it, it can immediately say, nope, this user isn't authorized, and it will probably just kick you out of the game and force you to relog in, or force you back in to do like a background authentication. So again, I'm assuming that they are already setting this up. I'm hoping that the game isn't set up in a way where it is asking the authentication service if a token is valid. It's not the most difficult thing to set up services that can validate if a token is valid without hitting the authentication service. I do sort of envision that the main issue that they're facing is really, how do we scale up our matchmaking service so we can connect you to an available instance as quickly as possible? One solution for that is maybe they just need to connect you to the exact same game instance for the entire connection, instead of trying to, as you're going from one area to another area, connecting you to different instances. I don't know. They haven't really said how the game is architected or how it's working as far as I know. If they have, let me know. If you're a developer on Last Epoch and you can talk about what's going on, let me know if I even got close to what the issue is. There's a good chance that I'm, making the wrong assumptions in different spots and stuff. But my goal for this video, though, was to just sort of peel back the layers a little bit and show that the game is pretty complex. Most systems are pretty complex and look like this. We haven't even really scratched the surface of really how all of this could be set up and working. But it's a lot more than just let's throw some more servers at the problem. They really do need to look at it now and say, we have a lot more users than we anticipated. What we thought would work for 10,000 users doesn't scale to 100,000 or 200,000 users. And now we have to go back to the drawing board and fix how it works. So please be understanding with the developers. They've been doing an amazing job working, I assume, probably pretty long hours trying to get these patches out for us. They've been working over the weekend. And honestly, it's not a good launch, but they have been pretty responsive and have at least been keeping us clued into what's been going on. Less so, I think, in the last day or so, which again, going back to please be respectful of the developers. They've already asked in the Discord for their engineers to not even look at the general chat anymore because there's just so much harassment going on. So be understanding. The game will probably work eventually. When it is working, I mean, it works flawlessly. It's just when you do hit these issues and then you kind of, everything just gets complex. So hopefully this video helped you out. Hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. I'd be happy to do more kind of ad hoc, just me talking and whiteboarding stuff, talking off the cuff. And that's it. That's the video.